celebrating all year long our 15th anniversary. So until April of 2023, we'll be celebrating 15 years of IndyPy. We started in 2007 here in Indianapolis. If you guys are interested in awesome IndyPy swag, we have for sale over on the table. We've got some scarves, some t-shirts. Do we have any socks left? 2 pairs of socks left. So there are 2 pairs of very rare, highly desirable, don't put them on eBay, you should buy them for yourself, socks from IndyPy that are over there. And let's see here. So I got like 2 screens. I gotta like try and like coordinate at once. Here we go, bingo. So make sure you're following IndyPy on Twitter. And if you're live tweeting tonight's event, make sure you use the hashtag IndyPy. I know we'll have some folks live tweeting as we go for, as we're talking about the various CI tools. So you can follow along, those of you who are virtual or those of you who are in the room. Feel free to use that hashtag to make sure you share things about IndyPy. Want to quickly go over our sponsors. I want to thank IndyPy for helping. Well, I want to thank 6 Feet Up for sponsoring and helping organize IndyPy. 6 Feet Up makes a world a better place by delivering impactful software. We're Python and cloud experts, as many of you probably know, and we help forward-thinking tech leaders build apps faster, innovate with AI and ML, and simplify big data and leverage cloud technologies. I also, oh man, like scroll on one and click on another. This is going to be an interesting coordination effort. I want to thank JetBrains. They have been sponsoring for the last few years. There'll be a couple door prizes. I'll do a live code right after we get done with the panel discussion for a couple of JetBrains professional licenses. And we'll have, I want to thank Reify Health for sponsoring. JFrog is also sponsoring. They've got 2 door prizes tonight for us. If you're looking for a new career, Reify is hiring. Check them out. They've been an awesome sponsor for the last couple of years of IndyPy. And JFrog will be giving away, they've changed up their prize. So we've been giving away Adafruit clues for the last couple months, well, up the year. And I talked them into doing the Pi portal. So if you guys are familiar with the Pi portal on Adafruit, it's a cool like screen, with a circuit Python microprocessor all built into it. So definitely check that out. If you do want to become a sponsor of IndyPy, make sure you check out this link or email Laura. Laura is online. Laura, you can't see her right now because she's probably behind somewhere over here.
I'm here.
You're here. Awesome. I've got too many slideshows and screens going someplace. So yeah, email Laura or go to that webpage and you can become a sponsor. We have a Slack. So if you are not on the IndyPy Slack, you can go to bit.ly/join IndyPy Slack or bit.ly if you're in the old school mode. Yep. But yeah, bit.ly/join IndyPy Slack.
And just in terms of Slack, just kind of especially for the online crowd is opposed to using the Zoom chat like we normally do, we really encourage you to join the Slack and let's post all of our questions in the general channel so that we can really do a full hybrid experience where the online people get to see our comments or the in-person people get to see the comments the online folks are making, and all of our speakers can also get all of their questions in one place. So please join IndyPy Slack. I put it in the Zoom chat. I'll put it in the Zoom chat again. But yeah, join and ask your questions in the general channel.
Yeah. So tonight, all the questions in the general channel on Slack, so that way folks online and folks in the room kind of have an even playing field for asking questions. That inviter link, if you aren't already part of our Slack, will get you onto Slack. All right, we've moved to meetingplace.io. So if you aren't RSVPing at meetingplace.io, please do so. We will be doing the door prize drawing. So whether you're online or in the room, you're equally eligible for the door prize, multiple door prizes this evening. And you need to be RSVP'd on meetingplace.io to be eligible. So if you RSVP'd on meetup.com, go re-RSVP over on Meetingplace because I will do the live code and it'll actually scrape the meetingplace.io RSVPs. Mark your calendars. We've got our October speaker already lined up. Is she actually on the call? I don't know.
She's not. She didn't make it yet. But
okay. So yeah, we're going to be doing some Python and machine learning. generating art. Should be awesome. So that'll be next month. It'll be virtual. We'll just stick to a quarterly in-person for now until maybe the first of the year, and we'll reevaluate how things are looking. And now why we're all here. Hot takes on CI tools we use. Let me unshare this screen up here. So, okay, cool. There's all the people were just hiding right behind the big window right there. So I've got up on the screen, we have got with us, actually, Lorena couldn't make it. We've got John and Anthony and Michael, right?
Stephen.
Stephen, there we go. Stephan. Okay, cool. So we've got our representatives. So I'll ask all the online folks to do is if you all can, if you're not one of the panelists, please turn off your video. So that way in the room here, we've got just the speakers for the panel this evening. Perfect. That's awesome. And then you've got obviously the whole room here. You can see us. So I'll be your moderator this evening. So we have representatives from, I'm just going literally in the order they are on my screen. JFrog with JFrog Pipelines. We've got Anthony Chiao with Microsoft from Azure DevOps. And then Stephen from GitLab, who is all joining us in a rare opportunity for us to actually have a quick and hopefully interesting discussion. I hope you all brought questions. Hope you all online have also brought questions. I'll be monitoring that Slack general channel as well, looking for awesome questions to come in. And so if you don't want to ask them or pose them yourself on the microphone, or we do have a mic here if you did want to like stand up and come and ask a question, but we're going to kick it off really quick with like a lightning talk version of your pipeline tools. So again, I'll go in the order that I see you on my screen. So that means, John, you're going to be first with a lightning talk, and then we'll go Anthony, and is it Stepha? How do you, I'm sorry, I didn't get for how you pronounce your name.
Yeah, my mom calls me Stephen, but
Stephen.
Half people I know call me Stephan. That's fine too.
Okay, Stephen, we'll go with that. And
Cool.
so that's the order we're going to go in. So I'm going to give you guys 5 minutes each on this. If I can time it. Actually, I'm going to get my phone out here. Just upgraded to a new watch, and I've not upgraded my like. So I'll give a quick 5-minute timer. So John, if you want to give the lightning talk version of your pitch for your pipeline, and we'll go around the room, and then I've got a couple follow-up questions, and then I'm going to survey the crowd for some questions as well. Does that work for everybody? Okay. Are you ready?
I guess so.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks, Calvin and Laura, and all the event organizers. I'm pleasure to be here. My name is Chiao. I'm currently leading a group of strategic customer architect, aka TAM, over here at JFrog. I have a very strong background in DevOps and data scientists, but I know this is not about my experience with Python. This is about JFrog and also JFrog Pipeline. So JFrog is well known for Artifactory, and the product itself is a universal binary repository managers. This means it can use to manage build artifacts, compile binaries, informations about your build, Docker image, Helm chart, conda, PyP. It doesn't matter. Artifactory support more than 30 package types specifically, as well as generic repository type for everything else. It is a single source of truth for all commercials and open source artifacts and binaries. JFrog Pipeline is part of JFrog platform, bringing together Artifactory, extract, and distributions into a unified end-to-end systems for one-stop DevOps. This is there's also a single plane for class administration can manage and kind of like organizes all the users group permissions to control who see what and who have permission to do what. Pipeline actually come with several out-of-the-box integrations to DevOps tool you likely to use the most. They allow you to quickly add connections to servers such as version control system, cloud providers, Dockers, and Kubernetes. All you need is the credentials, and it will automatically create a webhook with other tools. In the other words, it can easily integrate it with Jenkins. One of the good use cases is letting Jenkins to build artifacts, publish it to JFrog Artifactory, trigger the pipeline, and let the pipeline to handling all the promotion and the deployment afterward. It's not only allow you to hook into events from source repositories like Git, etc. It allow you to hook into events in JFrog platform itself effectively. using a platform event service. This help you to handle in the events like release bundle creations, a release image tags, or even a new artifacts promotion process. This help you simplify the end-to-end continuous deployments. There are actually 4 areas JFrog Pipeline is specifically good at, which is speed, simplicity, skills, and security. Again, I do want to elaborate more on the simplicity part because that's why JFrog Pipeline is good at. And the configuration file will be YAML, really similar to other tools out there in the market. We also provide something called native step, which pipeline native step provide you a streamlined way to specify your most common DevOps tasks, such as building, publish a Docker image, publishing build info for your Python PyP package, and promote it between artifacts repositories. Your pipeline can be as complex as you need. It can even be across multiple different packages. We also provide a very user-friendly UI interface. You can easily drag and drop, and you can try to trigger the different step of pipeline based on the, it's like a workflow, and you can go to each step and try to trigger those depending on which step you try to troubleshooting or you try to go toward. From Python developer perspective, I would say the major use cases will be building and publish artifacts to Artifactory. That's going to be either to be any sort of package, function, or class for commercial use. And eventually let other teammates or engineers from different organizations within the firm to retrieve those packages and try to reuse those packages. By using JFrog Pipeline, it will give the user some sort of end-to-end solutions from building the artifacts to testing, to promote, and to ready to deploy to productions. This is what JFrog, we actually see this as, we call it as a liquid software. So pipeline is kind of like a workflow to across the entire all the servers we provide in JFrog. Is that 5 minutes or less shorter than 5 minutes?
You've got 50 seconds left. Do you want to, if you got one little thing to add in there.
I pretty much covered everything. I do want to elaborate more as pipeline history is, it used to be a tools called Shippable, and JFrog acquired back into years ago. And it's a Seattle-based software companies. And then we start integrating into Artifactory, X-Ray, distribution, and basically all the nitty-gritties JFrog provided. And right now we make everything together as code as JFrog platform. And it's again, it can easily integrate with any other players in the markets like GitHub, GitLab, Azure DevOps, and basically everyone. It just come to, we do believe from after you actually building a package, it's easier to use pipeline to do all the promotion process and all the deployment process.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, John. Okay, Anthony Shaw, you are next on my screen. I want the 5-minute lightning talk of Azure DevOps.
Okay, I'm going to cover GitHub Actions as well. So Lorena can't be here,
nice.
but
Okay,
I've
yes,
offered to cover off both. Yeah, I'll do them both in 5 minutes. It's all good. Okay, so
multi-talented. I mean,
okay.
Really, we're honored to have you here.
Thanks, Calvin. No, it's really cool to be here. It's a shame I've never been to Indy and in real life, but I'd love to go one day, probably for the IndyCar, but maybe for other reasons.
You tell me when you're going to come.
Yeah, we can go together. So GitHub Actions and Azure Pipelines actually share some of the same technology. So that's why I'll cover off both. So GitHub Actions, actually, let me go back to the beginning. So Python itself is very, very dynamic. And I think if you've got CI/CD with Python, the more that you can test, the more that you can verify, the more that you can lint and analyze, like closer to the source code, the more successful you're going to be as a developer. So with all the CI/CD tools, like the more you can do with Python in particular to like verify that it's actually going to work when you ship it, when you deploy it, when you send it to users, the more successful you're going to be. So GitHub Actions and Azure Pipelines basically have an architecture where they can run your code and then run activities or tasks in a workflow. The actual platform itself, there are things which are shared. So we have images that we basically spin up some compute somewhere that can be on our infrastructure. So we can host that for you and run it for free, or it can be on your infrastructure. So if you have code that needs to run on your servers, you can do that. But most people use GitHub Actions and Azure Pipelines where Microsoft hosts the code and runs the actual tests and stuff. So both of these, you can describe a workflow. This can be something super simple, like get my source code and just run PyTest, like 2 steps. Did it pass? Yes or no? And if it didn't, then let's keep a record of that somewhere in Git. Or you can go all the way down to, I want to test Python versions 2.7 up to 3.11 beta, and I want to do that on Linux, Mac OS, and Windows, and multiple versions of Linux, multiple versions of Windows. So you can basically create like a matrix that tests like every possible scenario. And then your pipelines themselves can be simple, like I just said, like a couple of steps, or you can have something super complicated. I've seen some crazy projects which have got like multiple workflow files. They've got dependencies. They've got the whole thing mapped out as this big tree. So it can kind of scale from something super simple, which is what most people need to start off with, which is let's just run the test, let's run a linter, and let's verify it. And let's do that every time someone commits some code, all the way down to we've got this whole like integration flow, and we want to have composable workflows as well. So both GitHub Actions and Azure Pipelines do that. There are some differences between the two platforms, and I'm going to post a link in the Slack for anyone who wants to see the specifics of the differences. Generally, Azure Pipelines is used for private Git repositories, and it's used for more complicated workflows. GitHub Actions is used for typically public GitHub projects, but it's available for private as well. So there are some other differences, but yeah, for both technologies, there are also an ecosystem of plugins or extensions that people have made. So in GitHub, this is on the GitHub Marketplace. So you can download and use a task that will run security analysis, for example. It could integrate with a particular testing tool. There's thousands of different kind of either user built or third-party developed extensions into the workflows themselves. The same thing is available on Azure Pipelines, but it's a different marketplace. So there are 2 marketplaces, and there are thousands of extensions available for both. So for example, there's ones for Python to do linting, testing, publishing to PyPI. Like all of that stuff is built in and it's already available for you. You just need to plug in the parameters and off you go. Yeah, that's it.
All right. When we get to questions, I'm going to have a lot of questions about why we have 2 from Microsoft at this point. So be ready for that. All right, Stephen, you're next with GitLab.
Brilliant. Yeah. First thing, thanks for having me. Really excited to do this. Yeah, I'm coming from GitLab. The big pitch for GitLab is functionally that it's all in one. So we have your code management, your entire DevOps workflow is in one place. This is your project management, from your code management to your CI pipeline. It also works in this sort of cross-integrated way. You see a lot of teams do that, where they have their code living in something like JFrog or in GitLab or in GitHub rather, and then they use GitLab CI to stitch together in some other fun way if they want to. Sorry, I'm a little unprepared. I had prepped a whole bunch of slides for this, so I was like totally slide curveballed me. I'm not gonna lie. This
is more challenging, right?
Yeah, I was like, and they're like, and all the things you prepped, toss it. So stay with me.
Right.
One of the key advantages, things that people really sort of trade on, is the security aspects. So the thing I really love personally as someone who is not a security expert is not upsetting my security team by doing something wrong. So I can do things like include templates in the sort of the top of my CI file, where I can do things like dependency management scanning, checking for leaking securities out, which is really, really useful. If you're me, apparently you do that all the time. Static analysis tools for security training, which is super useful. It finds things like, oh, I'm running this Flask object in debug in production, or you're using an MD5 hash here when it is not, already technically an insecure hash for a crypto use case. Things like this. It just sort of finds flags, alerts, sticks them in your MR or PR, change request, whatever you call it, and alerts you to it, which is, in my mind, probably my favorite part, that just it all sort of comes together seamlessly in this nice cohesive package which you can then stitch into other things. We have integrations into GitHub. We have integrations into, I believe actually we do have ones in Artifactory. I was looking at those before this talk. So it's, yeah, the second big pitch for GitLab is that you can run it self-hosted if you want to, which I think it might be the only one I can think of that you can do that outside of Git, which I've met 2 people who have used.
Large audience there. Yeah.
No, they're great. Super nice, those 2. No, I'm kidding. There's definitely plenty who run Git and they like it. My friend's watching this and I've just mocked him. So there we go.
Yeah, I think it's perfect. You've embraced the hot take aspect of the night.
Oh yeah, I was chosen for this talk for a reason. Yeah, I think that's where I'm going to stop it. That's sort of the big pitch is all of these things that are coming down the pipe that are going to be future. We're working towards doing machine learning operations using GitLab CI/CD, which I'd love to talk about if anyone wants to talk about that, because that's sort of what my team focuses on. And we're also using applied machine learning to do things like suggest reviewers in your merge requests and other sort of things around your pipeline runs. So yeah.
Awesome. So timer right there. Okay, real quick, like rapid fire question. What is your one killer feature? What is the one thing everyone needs to come to your product for on your pipeline? So we'll start again with John. What's your one killer feature on the pipeline?
That's a great question. So just naming one, I would say,
just one.
I would say that it's the platform. It's the integrations with Artifactory, with Iterate distributions. It gives you the end-to-end solutions. People don't want to jump to different tools for different sort of tests. So JFrog platform actually provide a single unified page. You can just easily log in and it will have everything sorted out for you.
Awesome. Anthony, killer feature for DevOps and then killer feature for GitHub Actions.
Okay, DevOps would be Git mirroring to DevOps. So if you've got your Git anywhere privately, you can mirror to DevOps Azure pipelines and then run anything. And the starter for that is free. So you get a huge amount of hosted pipelines for free. The killer feature for GitHub is that it's free for public projects.
Yeah,
full stop.
Definitely. Stephen, killer feature for GitLab.
Oh, it's hard because they just said 2 of the features that I quite like from our platform. I think my favorite feature, personal favorite feature, I'm just going to throw this in Slack right now.
Okay.
This is 40 lines of YAML that will build you a Python project, test your Python project, add security checks. What else will it do? I wrote it yesterday. Give me a second. Add security checks. We'll also build your container, scan your container for vulnerabilities, and then deploy your container out to Elastic Cloud Services in 40 lines of YAML.
40 lines. That's impressive. Yeah. Okay.
And you do not have to be an expert to do this. I learned half of this yesterday.
Obviously spoken as a true non-expert. Cloud integrations. Each of you have kind of probably got some ties to specific clouds. We'll kind of go back around again. John, with the JFrog pipelines, are there some native integrations with AWS for deployment or Azure for deployment, GCP? Like, is there somebody missing from the list for you guys?
We do supporting all the cloud providers in the market, and you can easily deploy artifacts to those cloud providers.
Okay, now John, where's the sharp edges? Which one's going to hurt?
None of them going to be hurt.
No, they all work perfectly.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I will say the GCP integration is barely new, but it's eventually the same, right? So it just come to its new. So, yeah. But it is a maturing product. That's why we release it to the market.
Okay, Anthony. So obviously Azure DevOps, great integrations with Azure.
Azure DevOps has got great integrations with Azure, as you'd expect. You can deploy to any other cloud from there as well. The GitHub Marketplace, I think, so GCP, AWS, Azure, and the others, the vendors themselves actually maintain and publish their workflows. So Amazon write and publish the AWS one, Google write and maintain the Google one. So like they work really well because the vendors publish those and keep them up to date. They're also used by hundreds of thousands of projects, so a lot of the sharp edges have been.
So which ones should people watch out for, and where they might have a bleeding event?
Generally, security is the one everyone needs to be conscious of across all these platforms.
Yeah.
You need to be super careful when you're publishing to some sort of infrastructure, and like, how do you keep control over what you're publishing, making sure that you're not leaking credentials anywhere. So yeah, security would be the one thing I'd say people need to be careful of. All
right, Stephen, cloud integrations.
Cloud integrations, yeah. Our integrations with AWS and GCP are pretty great. Our Azure integrations are not as fleshed out as the other two, for reasons. No, I mean, yeah, we run on GCP. AWS is a big fish, and Azure is sort of newer in the game, and so there's that as well. There's also, it's I believe not a primary focus at the moment. You can also run GitLab and host it yourself on any one of these clouds, which is kind of another side benefit that I think you don't get elsewhere, which is nice. Sharp edges.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the security one, I just spent a whole bunch of time arguing about security, but I think Andrew is right. Always be, or Anthony rather is right here. Always be concerned about security. But I've never tried to push to deploy out to Azure. I've never tried, so I can't speak to that. I'll give that a try and get back to you. That might be
try your 40 lines against Azure and see what happens.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, yeah, that 40 lines will do against ECS.
Yeah.
GCP gets a little bit longer, and I've yet to find one for Azure. So.
Okay.
But I could be wrong. I'm not the expert there.
Yeah. All right. Next round. So, and actually, anybody feel free to throw some questions into Slack, or if you want to grab that microphone and so it's bit.ly.com/join IndyPy Slack, I believe, is the Slack link.
That is accurate.
That is accurate, man, from memory. It's crazy.
bit.ly/join IndyPy Slack.
Yeah. Or you can grab the microphone here. It is unmuted now and live. You will be talking to all the folks who are in the internet here. So as I wait for more questions to roll in, we did get just one here. I'm going to ask one more question around, and then we'll start hitting some of the audience questions. What is one feature you wish your platform had that it does not currently have? So John.
So at this moment, we do not have any DSC YAML validation at IDE levels, and that is on the roadmap. So we are working on it and try to release that as soon as possible. But that is going to be super useful for all the developers, because I do believe there's the other questions come to how to test locally, right? So we want to make sure we start supporting that part as well.
Yeah, developer friendly, 2 thumbs up. Let's get that feature released. Anthony, what's one feature you really want in your platforms? It's not there.
Oh man, that's a hard question. I wish that GitHub Actions had a testing UI. So if you run like thousands of tests and one of them fails, you're kind of looking at console logs. It would be nice if there was an interface to see that. And yeah, I think that's GitHub. Azure Pipelines, I don't know. Azure Pipelines does have a testing UI, so I can't use that one. Yeah, I don't know about Azure Pipelines.
How about a thing you regret in Azure Pipelines you wish wasn't there? Like classic mode.
Yeah, classic. Authentication can be quite tricky with Azure Pipelines because you've got social auth and you've got so you can sign in from like GitHub accounts, for example. That can be quite confusing, I think. Like that the authentication in general can be quite complicated.
Yeah, don't let me put words in your mouth. I'm just suggesting things.
No, I agree with you. Yeah, it's a frustration of mine as well. So I agree with you.
Okay, good. I'm not the only one. All right, Stephen.
Yeah,
killer feature you wish was there.
Killer feature I wish was there. Well, I'm on the ModelOps group working on the MLOps stuff, so that's sort of the stuff I really wish was more integrated. Is a lot of the machine learning operations stuff. Right now, doing a feature story in packages is like, you can do all the stuff you'd want for MLOps in the pipeline. We do it on my team. But my team's job is to basically eat that pain and then make it better so that other people don't have to have it. So I guess I'm happy it's not there, because then I have a job. It's nice. But on the other hand, it'd be nice if it was there. So yeah, that's what we're looking forward to building now.
Okay, awesome. We're going to go to Slack real quick for the next question. So Zolk asked, it can be slow to iterate when building a pipeline when you have to upload a YAML file and have to run it remotely. Good Lord, yes. Do you have any features which allow quicker iteration of pipelines? Inquiring minds, including my own, really want to know, because running a pipeline locally in a container would be pretty awesome if we could simulate some of those changes quickly locally. Anybody thoughts on that feature? Anything coming down the pipeline? What's the fastest way to iterate in your tool?
I can answer for both the products. It's quite a similar answer. The validation of the YAML file you can do by embedding the schema in your IDE, and there's the steps for doing that depends on which editor you're using. I've got a link that I can probably share in the chat for how to do that with PyCharm and how to do that with VS Code. That's a good place to start. Then beyond that, it's really tricky. So like running everything that runs in CI locally, like there are ways of doing it, but like there's so many steps involved and there's so many dependencies. I would suggest people look at which tools they're using in the chain, which ones are particularly fragile, and can they run those locally. Sometimes that can be using something like Tox to run multiple Python versions locally first before you run it in CI. If you're doing like special compilation and stuff like that, there's a tool called CI build wheel. None of this is specific to GitHub or Azure, just my general recommendations. CI build wheel is awesome because on my Mac, I can run and build wheels for Linux and test them, and Windows with a single command. So I recommend using CI build wheel if that's the part of your process that's particularly fragile.
Yeah, if you can put a link to that in the Slack, that'd be awesome. All right. Oh, hold on. Yep, I think we're good.
Okay.
So John or Stephen, fastest ways to iterate other than installing GitLab locally? I assume because you could self-host it on your own laptop,
Yeah.
right?
You could self-host GitLab locally and do that and do a pairing with your repository to your local machine and I wouldn't recommend that per se.
Probably not good, right?
But you can run a containerized direct runner on your machine and push your job there. Again, this really depends on your pipeline. So I don't want to like tell you this is the panacea of solutions, because it does depend on your pipeline. If you're leveraging a bunch of stuff that's in your secret store or other things, you're going to run into problems there. But yeah, I think there we go. Someone on the internet has already done the Stack Overflow, so I responded to that in a comment.
Nice.
There's a way to do it in some use cases. To Anthony's question about GitHub Actions, my last job, I was using Act, which is a project to try to run GitHub Actions locally. I'm not sure if it's still up and running, but it was kind of fun for, again, some things. If you don't need your secret store, you don't need certain things, Act is a great way to run GitHub Actions locally. Similar trick and style to the direct runner from GitLab.
Awesome. John, any tips for running quick iterations?
Very similar to what Anthony and Stephen mentioned. It is tricky because sure, you can install pipeline locally and try to push to the local pipeline and try to do all the testing, integration testing, unit testing, do it. But the whole point of trying to push or put your project on top of any sort of CI/CD is the free hands-on area you want to be at, right? Like a human-made mistake, and is to reduce the mistake is to push it into any sort of machine and ask the machine to do the testing. And if we want to test it locally, there are some other tools out there in the market. I used to use something called Habitat, which is actually a clean environment, and you can just spin out as a Docker image environment, and you can do testing around that area. It's actually owned by Chef Software. It's an open source tool, I believe, and there's a lot of other tools out there as well.
Yeah, I agree kind of with all of your stances that there's so many external dependencies you're probably going to have anyway when trying to run these CI pipelines that might be a difficult cliff to get over because I've run into that all the time. Next question's, who has any love for Oracle NetSuite? Anybody?
Yeah, I'll give it.
Get to laughing.
They
the question.
They have a market. They sell to that market, and the people I've met in that market are appreciative of its existence. Yeah, I've got a friend of mine who really likes it.
The one.
He's a friend. Yeah, he's a good friend.
All right.
He likes Java. You know, he loves the Oracles. Yeah, likes. I'm gonna go with likes. Yeah.
Okay. But your tools integrating with anybody integrate with that NetSuite?
I'm not sure.
I don't know. I have zero experience with it. Maybe you know. No. Oh, you have the question afterwards. Okay, maybe we need to move on because it's a tricky question. What's your question actually here?
We do
Yeah,
have integration. Yeah. I just looked it up. We do.
Yeah, you're good.
So Stephen has the silver bullet here with on-prem hosting, but if I'm in an ITAR,
Can't quite hear you.
Oh, here, hold on. Let me turn you up. 1 sec. Is it on? Is it unmuted? Oh, you know what? Oh, yeah, here. It's not on.
it says mic is muted. That's a good sign, right?
Oh, but the battery's dead. Dang it. Hold on 1 sec. We'll get some batteries here and come right back to that question. Anybody else from the Slack channel? Here we go. Batteries.
Sometimes it is a hardware problem, right?
How'd that get up there? Where did it all go? Sorry, I lost you guys up on the big screen. There we go. Big screen, back again. There's a comment in the chat. When will my Copilot write my YAML for my pipeline?
Mine, that if you enable it, it does a pretty good job. But I think if you set up the validation, that's probably a better option. Copilot's going to probably try and guess what you're trying to do, whether it's the validation's going to correct you. Yeah, I've used Copilot with the YAML workflows, and it works pretty well. If you enable it, make sure it's enabled for that specific language.
All right, now we have a question from the audience.
So
there we go.
With GitLab, we have on-prem hosting, so that's sort of the obvious answer there. But if I find myself in an ITAR world or I need to deploy to GovCloud, what does that look like for Azure Pipelines or for JFrog?
I'm not familiar with either of those. I'm from Australia, so I'm not familiar with the governance
for the
risks.
US defense apparatus, effectively.
Yeah. Okay. So with GitHub and Azure, so you can't run GitHub on private infrastructure, and you can't run Azure Pipeline. No, actually, you can't run the UI in private infrastructure, but the actual workers that run all the CI/CD stuff, the agents, you can run them wherever you want. So you can self-host those. So both GitHub and Azure Pipelines support that, and we've got a lot of customers who do that. They run it on their own infrastructure, and it uses private connections, private networks to deploy to things which have got special like rules or governance, which is probably with the GovCloud, I think you said.
Yeah.
What that requires.
Awesome.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else
John.
John.
I was going to add in from JFrog end. So JFrog self-hosted. So JFrog have two solutions. The self-hosted solutions, we do have Iron Bank image you can pull down and try to install on your federal area like Azure Cloud. And for the SaaS solutions, we are working on make sure all the products are actually FedRAMP certified, and hopefully that can be done by end of this year.
Awesome. Next question from Slack. And it's actually kind of related back to security. I know, for example, GitHub bought Dependabot as an automated security checking service. What do each of your offerings have in the way of security checking services and reports and basically helping users stay protected? So whoever wants to go first?
Oh, yeah.
Stephen, you're first then. You spoke.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a series of automated checks you can include. I threw a pipeline in example into the chat earlier, so it's somewhere up there. So my favorite thing to do is I include things like dependency checking for my Python code base. So it'll actually scan my dependencies and look for vulnerabilities. The container scanning is probably my favorite thing though. So make my container, save it to the registry, and then run container scanning against it. And it will flag me a frankly alarming number of CSEs every time I pull in some large container image. So that was nice.
Are you just using Docker scan, or are you doing some specific GitLab?
We have there's a GitLab process that wraps Docker scan and a few others. I think it's a couple of business projects that wraps together. The docs will probably do a better job of explaining that than I will. Sorry if you hear barking or squeaking in the back. My dog is apparently napping now. Sorry.
The remote world we live in now. We get it.
Right. It's great. So yeah, so that's sort of that's mostly what we offer. We have a series of already preset ones to do scanning, and then any other tool you want to integrate is pretty straightforward to integrate into the pipeline.
Cool. So Anthony, for like Azure DevOps, is there some built-in bits for security scanning?
Yeah, so most of the security vendors have got basically available in the marketplace their apps, I guess, or their code built into it. So whether that's for Python, there's a whole bunch of different vendors that do static secure code analysis or dynamic secure code analysis. Companies like Checkmarx, HPE, Sneak does like package dependency analysis. They all have stuff in the marketplace, so you can basically just drag and drop those tasks in, depending on which security vendors you use. GitHub is a bit different. So if you have a GitHub project, there is a security tab. If you go on the security tab, it will actually guide you through setting up the security best practices for your GitHub projects, which includes doing things like Dependabots alerts. You're setting up your security reporting. It also does static code analysis. So we also acquired another company called Semel a few years ago. So that's now called CodeQL. And it will basically do analysis of your code base and tell you when people have committed stuff which goes against best practices or might introduce a security vulnerability. You can also do that in Azure Pipelines. You can use the same technology. It's called CodeQL.
I'm going to check that out because we have a project right now where we're using Azure Pipelines, and I think that would be helpful. All right, John, from a JFrog Pipeline standpoint, is there any automated security tools that are included in the platform?
Yeah, so JFrog pipeline itself is integrated closely with other JFrog servers, right? So JFrog entire platform, we do have a service called X-Ray, which is vulnerability scanning and also dependency scannings. And it can easily integrate it with pipeline and make sure all your artifacts and what you try to deploy to are actually vulnerability free, or you provide CVE score based on the reports that's synced with MongoDBs. And in the meanwhile, we do acquire the other security scanning company called Videos, and there is the other top layers of kind of like a security scanning features is going to be releasing very soon. We call it as an advanced security package. It's actually including the malicious code scannings analysis, and it also including the infrastructure as a code scanning analysis as well.
All right, awesome. Any quick questions from in the room here? Anybody want to ask a quick one? I've got another one go from the chat here. Actually, I'm going to go from the chat. In your opinion, which platform has the simplest UI? Do we need to use the UI?
For designing a workflow, I personally don't use the UI. There are some tools for like designing workflows in UIs, but I think most of the tools you generally want to just describe them in text using an IDE. There are definitely.
Maybe I should rephrase that to user experience, like UX. How about that?
Yeah, I get GitHub's UX is definitely a lot simpler than Azure Pipelines. So I'll compare our two products, I guess. I think the UI for Azure GitHub Actions is simpler than the Azure Pipelines one. Like it's straightforward to see what's running, what's failed, what happened, and then seeing which stage of the pipeline failed. Designing pipelines in a UI, you can do bits and pieces in the UI, but generally you're just going to be going in a text editor to do it.
Yeah, I can attest to the Azure DevOps editing UI. The little, can I just permanently hide the stupid add-ons thing that's on the right-hand side of that thing? Because I never use it, because every time I click it, it inserts it right where my cursor is in the middle of some other YAML.
Right. Yeah.
I'm throwing my own little complaint out there at this point. Sorry, I had to get that one in. John, simplicity on UX for you all?
UX UI on the JFrog pipeline side is actually very similar to Azure DevOps, GitHub Action, all the tools out there. It's a place you can easily go there and try to understand what's going on with the workflow, right? We all joking like eventually all the DevOps engineers are YAML engineers. So if you don't want to use UI, it's actually very easy to look into the workflow YAML file to better understand what step is actually precedence or is a future step or pull request for the next steps. So I personally don't use UI that often, but sometimes I do just because I want to trigger a specific step. And the JFrog pipeline do give you the option of sure you upload entire YAML file and it probably will trigger from end to end, but you don't have to do that. You can actually just trigger by step and then go to UI. Just easily hit that like trigger buttons on the last specific step, and that will just go through the pipeline again.
All right, awesome. Stephen, commentary on the simplicity of the GitLab UI?
Yeah, I think there's this sort of a back and forth. It depends on where I find it's often, when it comes to the simplicity of your UI, it really depends on where you started first, right? So with a lot of people who start on one platform and then go to the other, they immediately have this push to go back. So I can see how that'd be biased. And I will admit I was also in this biased way. I've come to really quite appreciate the GitLab UX experience because I take my YAML file and then I get this sort of rendered out pipeline with all my associated cross needs and other things that connect. And I find it really simple to understand now. I also do appreciate the other three offerings we're talking about here. Do have a pretty simplified UI. Azure DevOps, I think, Anthony, you hit it on the head. The GitLab or GitHub one is a bit simpler to sort of jump into than the Azure DevOps pipelines. Yeah, I think the other knock on, I think if I have to pump the product, so I will. Having to leave GitHub and go to Jira is not a consistent UX experience. Having to leave my pipeline and go to my issues and then my tracking board all within the same tool is pretty swell. So yeah. The broader DevOps experience, I find that and the JFrog offering is similar in this way.
All right, we've got a question from Slack. 1 second. Can a user easily define and select the underlying worker machine's configuration, memory, CPU, disk, etc.? And it's basically, it sounds like this would be a real nice thing to have for ML ops and heavy pipelines where you might need a GPU or even specialized hardware. What does each offering give you as far as flexibility for the workers? Stephen, I'll let you go first.
Cool. Yes, we do have this flexibility built in. This is something my team bumps around a lot because we want to run on GPUs because we're doing models and such. So GPU runners exist. One of the other benefits is if you are in the case as described earlier, the ITAR situation or something like that, where you're self-hosting, you can run, your runners can be basically any size you want. There's recommendations for certain things. I believe you can also cross-connect your GitLab CI to a Kubernetes cluster and run it against your Kubernetes cluster. So that allows you truly breathtaking and somewhat paradox of choice level of distraction and choice. But it's, yeah, the GPU is exposable. A lot of the other stuff is exposable. I'm not sure where we are with IoT running. If you wanted to run on, say, an ARM chip, I'm not sure where we are with that. But
So
then
that's
again,
from your own. That's from your own hosted version of it, right? That you can run on a GPU in the hosted GitLab.
we also, yeah, the hosted one. You also, if you, like I said, if you are running it in a self-hosted way and you want to cross-connect to your GPU or use your GPU machines, those are totally viable as well. I've done that a few jobs ago. It took me a while to convince our IT department to let me do it, but I did it.
All right, Anthony. Flexibility in the builders and compute.
Yeah, so if you're using our hosted environments, then for both platforms, it's a no. So we just have a massive pool of compute resources for both GitHub and Azure. And if you've got a job and you publish it, especially for the on the free side as well, then it will run on whichever compute we have available at the time. You can't say that I require this specific like GPU, for example. If you have access to those resources, then you can host the runners on those resources. So if you've got VMs in the cloud, which have got GPU set up, then you would put, this is what most people do, is they put the runners on those services and then they link it in with their pipelines. There are some differences between GitHub and Azure as to how you say, okay, these runners have got like special hardware, so run these jobs on these runners. There's different names for doing that in GitHub and Azure, but you can do it on both. So you can say not all runners are the same, like we've got special hardware and this pipeline, or when I promote this, I want it to run on this particular environment. So yes, it can be done, but it's not available for free.
All right, John.
So it's really similar to other tools out there. For self-hosted one, you can run the agent wherever, whatever you want to be run on, right? So you can bring as big as CPU, GPU, whatever you want for your self-hosted versions. Unfortunately, for the SaaS one, we do have a list of family type that we define based on which environment or which cloud provider the customer decide to spin up their Artifactory or entire JFrog platform. We do have a roadmap or items that's on the roadmap is to allow users to actually bring your own clusters or nodes to our SaaS solutions. What does that mean is eventually you will bring your own nodes or clusters and you can integrate it with our SaaS JFrog platform, and you can just, again, really similar to self-hosted, it just come to you bring your own stuff, kind of bring your own key, right? So, yep.
Awesome. Cool. Again, any questions from the room? It's your opportunity. You've got 3 awesome vendors sitting right here, ready to answer any question you got. If you've already put it, you got one for me? All right, grab this.
I've read a little bit about some of the packages getting corrupted by mischievous people over the past couple of years. What kind of systems do you have in place to catch any of those corruptions for authenticated packages coming from other repositories?
It's kind of like the supply chain attack.
Yeah.
Vectors. Awesome.
Coming out with some hard questions today, aren't you guys?
This wasn't supposed to be a cakewalk.
It's like just like every field of development. Like, I don't think there's anything specific to GitHub or Azure for like dependency verification. I'm sure that JFrog probably does have something like that, because if you're hosting your own artifact repository, then you've got better verification inherently, and you can kind of. So I think it kind of comes down to how you're managing your dependencies and whether you have a private artifact store or a private PyPI or something compatible with it. GitHub doesn't offer that, nor does Azure. So it would kind of come down to how you're looking at your dependencies and how you're verifying them.
Well, Azure has the artifacts part of DevOps. It doesn't.
Yeah. So both tools, and I'm sure all the CI/CD tools have got, like, you can create artifacts during your build, and you can have a pool of artifacts for that job. And then in Azure DevOps, you can promote that build, and then it uses the same artifacts to promote that through to the production environment. It actually links to another question about SBOM generation. So someone was asking about software bill of materials. I'm sure all the tools have got this, but you can, there's a couple of options. We've got a tool that's open source to do that. I'll just link it in the chat.
I love the real-time links into Slack with, answering questions and getting the resources. This has been great.
Yeah, so doing software bill of materials from your build and verifying your build and then having a report of that is super useful. Verifying downstream dependencies, especially for Python, is complicated. I think you're looking at like how immutable is what you're deploying and the virtual environment and the packages which are being pulled in. I'm sure the JFrog. I'm sure John's got a good answer for this.
Yeah, actually, John, let's hear it from John right now.
Sure. So yes, thanks, Anthony. JFrog, we do provide like I would say end-to-end solution for this S-bound / vulnerability out there, like third-party dependency risk over here, right? Because eventually all the artifacts indexing into JFrog or users try to pull down from your artifactory will get indexed to X-ray, and X-ray will start scanning all of vulnerability dependencies and try to figure out if there's anything that's have a very high CVE scores and start blocking those based on the policy you guys defined. In the meanwhile, there's also a button you guys can click to go to, let's say, go to certain repository and click and try to explore the entire repository as bound. And that's not it. There's actually more than features than that. I can definitely post more webs link on the Slack channels. And but yeah, JFrog, because we do have artifactories eventually, again, source of truth of all the artifacts. So we can help to scan the entire thing and try to protect your users, try to pull down the vulnerability package from outside source market. And we are also working on a process called curation process and also a GitLab process that will actually help you to bend in and make your environment more secure for all the outsourced artifacts.
GitLab, Stephen, what you guys got?
Let's see. I believe we are currently. Just double checking. I was actually I pulled it up. I'm like, do we have this thing? Yes, we do. So this is a mechanism to generate SBOMs in GitLab. There is also a current work underway to make that whole workflow a bit easier and smoother for people. That's what I was like, no, I've heard something about this. That's supposed to come out sometime in the future. But there is currently a way to do it. To do your dependency list, we also do dependency scanning. I think I keep referencing this thing I dropped in the chat ages ago. But yeah, I'm gonna keep doing it. There's a dependency scanning injection there. So
40 lines of YAML.
Yeah, 40 lines of YAML. Within that 40 lines of YAML is dependency scanning for some of your software packages you're pulling in for your project. This is not a silver bullet to deal with a supply chain attack. There's not always a lot you can do there other than control the entirety of the supply chain, which even still, as far as SBOM, and yes, there's SBOM generation and we do the dependency scanning. It's, you are not, anybody who believes they are perfectly secure is fooling themselves. You are not safe.
Agreed. All right, we got one more from the audience here. James, you want to unmute? Well, with the microphone. The follow-up coming.
Yeah, this is Tom. On the SBOM generation, most of the tools that I've seen are just at the repo level or the artifact level or the artifact repository level. The problem I've seen that you have to solve is that when we have 200, 300, 400 repositories at an organization and a 0-day vulnerability comes out, which one of those repositories needs to be updated? And it's really hard to figure out which one of those things there are. So you guys have tools that will look across all those repositories and say, hey, Spring version X is used in these, 50 repositories out of your 200, please go remediate those.
So I do believe that question can be solved. One of the features the team is currently developing is to block in the artifacts based on CVE scores and or based on certain CVE numbers. And when there's any 0 days vulnerabilities or attacks coming up, the CVE will eventually get released, right? And we should be able to stop blocking artifacts from the entire artifactory levels or from any repositories levels and see, hey, here's the CVE score of, let's say, 200091, and let's try to block that one across the entire fleet.
Anthony, Stephen, any tools on your guys' side?
For the entire organization level, you make a good point that it's mostly project level, it's mostly group level, the entire organization level. I don't know of any. That doesn't mean they don't exist. The security team is usually hard at work at these sort of problems. I cannot think of one off the top of my head, but you're right. It's with 200 projects plus, it becomes complicated. It's doable, but you're gonna, yeah. How do we do it faster? You could probably do it with the API if you really, really wanted to.
Yeah, from our side, I guess we've got the bots which would inspect all the individual repositories to look at what dependencies you've got. However, that's obviously only going to check specified dependencies, not dependencies of dependencies. And also that will only tell you what dependencies are in the source code, not which ones have been installed in the environment. If you're verifying environments, that's a whole different tool chain. CI/CD can do some stuff, but generally there's like more of a production audit capability of what's actually running in production code. And some of the vendors I put in the chat, Sneak in particular, does a lot in this space. So Sneak as a tool can do vetting and verification of deployed containers and deployed environments. And it also does the bot as well for all of the vendors. Actually, Sneak's got integration into all of them. So I recommend looking at them as a security vendor, and then there's some other ones as well for doing audits of deployed containers, deployed images, and then deployed environments.
All right, James, you got a quick question? Quick, or
it's kind of a lowball question, and there's probably an easy answer that I'd never Googled for it, but I had a tool recently that didn't do the right thing in terms of throwing an error code when it failed. I'm using Bitbucket Pipelines, so I'm that guy. So
which they declined to show. They didn't decline. They just refused to respond to us to show up. So
did you write a JIRA ticket? I mean,
yeah.
If they had the right documentation. So you know, other than checking for error codes, is there a integrated way to fail a build if you get error output or some non-error code response?
I can answer that for both products.
All right.
It's because I've written extensions for both of them. So you can write custom rules which say if you see this in the output, mark it as failed, and that can be based on the text output. So like look for a particular message or filter or something. You can do that with both products. By default, actions will fail if there's a non-zero exit code and a task. And also extensions can specify their own exit requirements. But like I said, you can write custom rules in a pipeline that say, if this message appears in the output, just mark it as failed.
Other tools, GitLab.
So the question basically is, assuming my process does not respond in the way that we expect all processes to respond, do you detect this output failure and thus fail to build? Well, that's not as easy as it sounds. I've used a few tools where you go to run something in Bash and it will not. You run a Bash script and it doesn't pop out an error code the way you expect it to because it gets eaten or swallowed somewhere. There isn't really a good way to do that. Again, you'd probably just have to specify if you're trying to build a string and then it ends up being blank and thus, or you're trying to access a variable for something and it should fail immediately. In the case that you're running this in a shell environment, I would say like set E and a whole bunch of other Bash type things are the way to go. Every time I have to do this in a like shell environment, I put fail fast bash into Google and open the first link. And I'm not even kidding. It's literally the same first link from a blog post like 10 years ago. Then I just copy the top of it and paste it in, and it works perfectly every time. Not kidding about that. It's great. I'll see if I can take that blog post up for you.
Yeah, put that link in there. Was it because everyone loves the API that returns 200 with a message that says error?
Yes.
That's their favorite, right?
Yeah. Those people make sure that I still have a job. They're great.
Hey, John, the JFrog Pipelines support non-standard erroring?
Yeah, so it's not non-standard. I think it's more tool. You can use bash as the type and try to identify what sort of error, or you can even do a timeout, right? You can do a timeout, say let's retry it 3 times, and if it failed, then just kill the process, or let's try it 5 times, or depend on the time you can set. And it's actually that's something we call as a native step. Like you can easily define it using YAML and try to define the configuration you want, or how many try you want to give to your pipeline opportunity to run. So
It's weird. I don't know why sometimes it gets that and sometimes it doesn't. Yeah, that one's muted. That's me over here. Okay, we're back. Sorry about that. So that was the answer to the question, though, right? It's basically
That's
some
correct, yes.
bash trickery to detect inappropriate responses. We're gonna do 2 more questions and then a quick wrap up, and then we're gonna go into our door prize drawing. So if anybody in the room really wants to get their one last burning question, I'll make the room get one and chat gets one. I've already picked one out from the chat that I want to ask. So we'll go with the chat one. You all contemplate amongst yourselves. Maybe you can do a little Rochambeau, rock, paper, scissors and figure out who goes. But the David Glick asked, do any of the platform tools help large test suites run in parallel across multiple runners? If I've got a way to split my tests up across multiple parallel runners, is that something you can do?
I'm on mute, so you can't hear me sighing. That's a hard question. Thanks, David. Yeah,
David's a smart guy, real smart guy. Know him.
There are. I mean, this is not specific to either of our platforms, and it would probably apply to some of the others as well. I mean, generally, the matrix that you define, the test matrix, is down to the job. So you can't have a job that runs across multiple instances in the matrix or multiple compute nodes. You can use some like PyTest XDist, but like with remote options, if it's PyTest we're using. But that's not integrated into either Azure or into GitHub. So that's something you'd have to figure out with additional steps. Other option you could do is to build a test matrix, and then the job does the grouping of the tests. So if you can do it that way, if you can split your tests up into groups and have them as separate jobs, then you can build a test matrix which can distribute them that way.
I mean, I could see this being applicable to like ML ops. If you were building a big model, how could you distribute that compute?
Yeah, so we actually do support parallel job running. You can specify your number of parallelism of your jobs. And as mentioned, you can sort of cross-hook to different clusters if you really wanted to try to extend your compute power beyond what we would offer you. I threw a link in the chat that describes, there's a blog post from back in 2001 that describes how people do parallel jobs work in GitLab. So yeah, it's actually quite straightforward. You have a space job, you extend out your job, and then you set the flag that says parallel and then a number, and that'll give you your parallelism.
Awesome.
I could have sworn there was a way to do something like this in GitHub Actions. I could have sworn there was, but
you can run. So you can run, if you've got a matrix, you can run jobs in parallel. Mm-hmm. But I was meaning more if you've got one job, which is like run PyTest. Can you get that job to somehow run across like multiple machines at the same time, and then bring back all the test results? I thought that's what David meant, but
I think that may be more the spirit of the question for sure.
That I don't think so. I mean, that's like fundamentally hard, because it's like, hey, go run this job, and I'm like, cool, I, the platform vendor, are going to disassemble your job and split it for you, and like, I'm doing a helpful thing. This is like when someone tidies up your apartment for you and you don't know where anything is. It's a hard problem. No, yeah, I would. Maybe
JFrog solved it. John, you guys got this one?
No. Well, I wish we solved it, but it's come to it just. Sure, we do support in multiple different steps. You can run steps parallel, but that's really similar to what Stephen's saying. It's come to you can split easily and ask all the job to run, right? But when you come to what David is asking, I believe he's just trying to, let's say you want to run multi-threaded, or you want to do some multi-analysis from some sort of machine learning code and ask say to run parallels. It's hard to just split out to different nodes. So we might need to do some sort of microservices like from code levels and try to split the jobs into different steps, but that's kind of out of pipeline scope. You have to assign each node a specific task, and try to somehow group it on the test levels or on the YAML file itself. Try to make sure you
So it sounds like David's got a business idea right here. If he can
Yeah.
split up a single PyTest run across multiple machines, he can make millions. Startup idea, David. Let's hear it. One more question from the crowd in here. Who's got a question then? Burning, they've got to know about their CI pipeline, or they wish it did something. Oh, so okay, then we can use that to be like, how do you sell someone who doesn't have a CI pipeline right now that they need it? That's your final question. Anthony, go.
Yeah. How do you? Oh, the sooner you can learn that the code that you deployed is broken, the cheaper it is to fix it. So run your tests locally first, deploy, run them somewhere else, and then deploy. So yeah, that's general across all of them.
So it's going to be cheaper. Tell your management that. You heard it right here.
There's a really famous graph of like cost of fixing bugs and how close it was to actually writing the bug.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, someone needs to dig that up and put it in the chat. All right, John, you got to sell somebody who doesn't have a CI pipeline.
So I will recommend you to start running testing, integration testing, unit testing using the pipelines. And once it's ready, try to deploy to whatever you want to deploy. If you guys don't want to deploy or you guys don't have a deployment process using the pipeline yet, that's fine. Just do testing, do the CI/CD side, and then because the beauties of using pipeline is you can test it through multiple different OS level OS versions, right? And for sure, your production environment entire fleet is not going to keep it on the same OS level or same OS versions. So you are able to write a test against all the different suite and try to test it against it. And that will definitely help save money, reduce the risk on the production environments, and eventually it's cheaper. I mean, again, save money. So.
All right. Stephen, sell us on a CI pipeline if we don't have one.
Yeah, see, on the list of reasons I'm not in sales. What's out there? I having worked in games, which is typically an industry that's about a decade behind everybody. I've actually run into people who argue about the villainy of tests and how terrible CI is and why you shouldn't do them. So I've tried to convince these people. My opening argument was, do you like sleeping? Which
Nice.
didn't go over well. Honestly, yeah, the sooner you catch the bug, the sooner you can fix the bug, the less it will compound, the less it will integrate with something else. It's just, this is basically like if you do something wrong, you'd like to know immediately. So if you're baking a cake and you dump the cinnamon in and it's all in one side of the bowl, you can scoop that out. You know what I mean? It doesn't get mixed in. And then suddenly you're like, no, there isn't cinnamon in my cake. If you're opposed to that, I don't know. It's a hard sell when you run into somebody who doesn't want to be sold on it. If you're running into someone who does want to be, who is open to the idea, then yeah, cost savings in the long run are definitely a value. Peace of mind is a huge value for me. That's what got me into it. It's just, I run these tests and I have a bunch of tests. I know they're getting run. I know when other people are running them, they're getting run. And when something goes wrong, the CI pipeline barks at me and tells me that it's something wrong. I need to fix it, or I broke something, or yeah. So peace of mind, cost savings in the long run. Sleep, get sleep.
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna talk to some people at GitLab. I'm gonna get you promoted to sales. I know some folks there.
Oh God,
it's
that's
gonna
not
be
what
great.
the world needs.
It's gonna be great. All right, I want to thank the three of you for volunteering to be a part of this grand experiment and coming together, especially Anthony. Good Lord, what time is it there? It must be like 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning.
No, it's 10:30 in the morning.
Oh, 10:30. Okay, so it's pretty reasonable.
On Wednesday.
But it's like,
yeah, on Wednesday.
It's like time travel though. He's in tomorrow, people. So he can actually tell you what's going on tomorrow, which is pretty awesome. Thanks, John. Thanks, Anthony. Thank you, Stephen, for being with us. This huge round of applause from the room in here. Huge round of applause from the online virtual group hybrid that's going on in there as well. We're gonna switch over and do the door prize, unless anybody's got a final comment and anything they want to say, last words to put this to rest. Wow.
Write
Test
your
your code.
tests. Just write your tests.
Write your tests. I think those are good final words
And
for
run
sure. All right, awesome. Thank you so much again for being here with us.